So hi, first off, how are you?
I'm okay, other than this cold. I think a lot of people are sick these days.
It's the season for sure. For sure. Um, so what inspired you to be a part of this docu-poem?
Um, this is a super collaborative piece, as you can tell, and it's sort of across space and time because space is all the different people who worked on it, which is always true in a film. But in this one, Jackie and my editor, Mar, Jackie wrote the text, and Michelle Indegiacello, who made the soundscape, all contributed throughout the process. So we were in a kind of constant weaving together of our inputs and our feedback. Um, and the other thing, I mean, like, how did it even come about was because of June 2020 and the uprisings that followed the murder of George Floyd. And it was, I'm sure everybody remembers how dramatic it was from one day when everyone's still isolated, alone, looking in these little Zoom boxes, to suddenly just breaking out of our homes and breaking out onto the street. But I think breaking out of our belief that anything like that can happen without us speaking back and without us acknowledging our shared community. And people really stood up for that. And Jackie and I kept talking about it. And she's obviously this brilliant writer. And she was writing, and I was filming things on my camera and talking to my other friends who are all artists. And finally, just saying, can we spend some time together talking about these things with the camera rolling? Not where I film you and interview you or film you and you explain things to me, but more like, what would it be like to share the experience of how we experience things that are happening in our lives, not only specifically that way, but the fact that we believe things can change. And I think artists are always working with change because they're creating things that don't previously exist.
Right. Um, Now I kind of want to ask you like a clarifying question about what a docu-poem is, because this is my first experience with that term. So I guess kind of like where did you come up with that? Did the team come up with that? And then kind of like how was this like the perfect format for what you wanted to do?
Right. Well, we definitely made it before we tried to classify it, before we named it or chose that term. I'm sure I've heard it elsewhere, but I think, just started using that at the end because it was the best option for what we had done, which ended up being these 6 parts, which was to help people see the evolution and there isn't really a resolution, but the understanding we left with sort of had broken down into these 6 movements. We didn't want to call it an experimental film because, excuse me, those tend to be, something about light and dark and colors and sound, unfamiliar sounds and things like that. And this is not, in fact, a very abstract film. It's just an unusual way of telling a story by saying there is no story here. There's just life. And determining that sort of life is the story. And I think we didn't want to get away from the fact that it's documentary in the sense that I'm filming with artists and talking to artists. I mean, people are talking, you see people. So it's not abstract. Like,
Mhm.
abstract is something that's not that. And there are moments of abstraction with shadows and reflections and seeing through glass and rain and seeing through people's artwork, which in some cases might fall into the definition of abstract. But this was more about trying to, we didn't want to call it experiential because obviously any film should be experiential, even if we don't feel like that. But, resulting after we see one. But I think this one really is saying, come share this experience and let us know what you think, how it moves you, what you take away, and keep the conversation going. It was just the beginning of or the middle of a conversation, really, is what it is. But it's definitely not the end of a conversation in the way that some people like. You finish a project and you think that's the thing, and then you share it as if it's an object. This is ongoing. It started before I was born, and it will carry on forever, whether people have access to the 90-minute film digital moment that we created or not. The conversations, the artwork, the way of seeing the world, the effort to create a new lexicon, to give us new ways of talking about each other and identity and relationships and what we want in life. I think we want community, we want connection, and we're up against a lot, not just this sort of more literal sense of COVID, although it's definitely a COVID movie. But we never say that, but everyone comes out and is like, wow, like COVID, because you watch it and you can remember what it felt like to be isolated, and you see what it's like to be connected and to have your community of care around you.
Yeah. I was just talking with my students today about COVID because it's like I think today's like the actual anniversary when it was labeled a
Wow.
pandemic. Um,
Oh,
so
wow.
it's just like a really nice like I guess like connection between like what we're talking about and like again the conversation's still going.
You're exactly right. And I find that age group, I have 4 children in their 20s and all their friends and my godchildren, and then any teaching or connection I have to university, as you were just describing. And we show this film at universities all the time. That age group is really eager for a way to process, to get through what happened to them 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And there isn't much for them other than those like BetterHelp ads that just run on like
Yeah.
Instagram and on podcasts, like you might need some mental health care. Give us a call. But other than that, there's not a way for them to see that they don't have to disavow those years from their life or those lessons or those experiences, no matter how traumatic, that they do need to grieve, but that it's not, uh, they don't get any other life. They don't get any other chance to be 16 or 21 or 25 or however old they were at that time. But I think they need more resources, more tools to be able to move past that. And my favorite thing anybody of that age group ever said was afterwards, when a young one from our office who had just started working there when we were finishing this film, and they watched the rough cut, and I went in because 2 hours had passed, and I was like, what is going on? And they were crying and writing madly in their journal. And I said, are you okay? And they said, yes, I just didn't want it to end because I didn't want to be alone again. And to me, that was COVID. That was them saying, oh my God, I was transported back to all of those feelings and all of that anxiety and confusion and isolation, fear, you know, not even misunderstanding, no understanding. And seeing that being around your people, however you might define the best of that kind of relationship, and being around artists, and I describe artists very broadly. There's a baker and a gardener and someone painting someone's fingernails and, a photographer, but like photographer, someone who writes poetry that's never published. Like there are ways we are engaging in our own lives that not only help us get through, but help us improve, like help us have better experiences, help us make positive change.
I like that. Thank you for that. Um, One thing that as I was watching this, it it's one of those things where like filmmakers and writers like they seem separate from their work, but they're really not. So I was wondering, because there's this through line of breathing through the chaos, um, how did you breathe through the chaos while making this?
That's so beautiful, that idea of us being separate from our work when we're not, because I would say that's one of the fundamental values or beliefs or something that we bring into making this movie. I mean, I would definitely say making this movie was how I breathed through the chaos for sure, because we started in June of 2020 and we didn't finish till a year ago. And I was in constant conversation, like the one we're having, where we're just like, what does it mean? Where do we go? How do we understand anything? And, I think that the idea of being able to express ourselves, to really have that critical thinking, a young student who'd been in New York City public schools and had an art program. We were talking about the art program once they were grown up. And they said to me, it was great because I learned in that class how to look into chaos and see a pattern. So they said that to me about, I don't know, 8 years, 10 years ago. And I'd always been thinking like that was it. But then there's this other thing they said, that we need patterns, but we can have too many patterns. And that takes away all kinds of variation or diversity or chance or difference. And we don't want to lose that either. We need unity while having the richness of this world and of our lives. But then the other thing they said was, the art studio classroom was the only place I ever went that I was asked what I thought. Everywhere else, I was asked for the answer, and I either knew it or didn't. Every other class, right? Where's Georgia? When did the war start? What's 2 + 2? Right? Like every other class was like playing Trivial Pursuits, which is always a game I've always hated. So you either know the answer or you don't. But there's like the Pablo Freire, the Freirean model, as opposed to a banking model where you put in information and then see if they got it. Like, and it's very transactional. And Freire was saying, what do you need to talk about? Like if you're learning a new language, I don't need to teach you about how to talk about golf if you don't play golf and you don't care about golf. Like, what do you care about? What language do you need? And I think we all need a lot more language that helps us explain and understand art writ large. I mean, I think we all use art way too narrowly, but we need a way. That is what critical thinking is. And I think the more critical thinking any of us have, the better off we all are.
I agree 100%. Um, I am just about out of time, but is there anything else that you wanted to add about Meanwhile?
Oh gosh, that's way too big a question. I mean, I did, like, I made it and I did stop. I mean, Jackie said, we're never going to finish this film. You're never going to stop because you love talking about it too much. But it's because it really is my life. And then another friend, the film opens on Friday at the Firehouse at DCTV, and it'll play there for a week. And on opening night, there's a Q&A where Michelle Ndegeocello, who made the soundscape, and our friend Nona Hendricks will be in conversation with me and Michelle and the moderators, Jackie Glover. And Nona, when she first saw the film, said to me, I don't see how you'll ever make another film because this is your whole life. This is everything you've been thinking about and talking about and doing in your whole life. And when she said that, it did feel like that. I was like, I guess I won't. I mean, I've been making films for 45 years. So I was like, I guess I'll have to come up with something else. I have started working on a little short film with someone else. So that's exciting, but there is a sense that this is the sort of was a real ability, like what we were really successful in bringing together and unifying a way, a step on the path. I don't always like to say forward, but a step on the path, wherever we're going. We were moving time. We were creating change. That's what I would say.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting. I absolutely loved it, and I'm probably going to watch it like 3 or 4 more times. So,
Love that, Beth. Thank you so much. It's really nice to speak with you.